Hello there, McKnox here, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, let me give you the quick rundown. I am a crochet artist. I do other things, gaming, filming, literature, but you're not here for that. If you clicked on this video, then you're here for this adorable wool felted mouse. This is meant to be a beginner video to people new to wool felting, although a little experience can never hurt. Just like any art form, wool felting is all about patience. But I will be walking you through this process step by step. And with that being said, let's get started. For this project, you will learn to make the mouse, but I will also show you some basic steps of how I put this all together. For your wool, you're going to need a body color, pink for the tail, ears, paws, and nose, and a tiny bit of black for your eye. Now, this next part is optional, but I do recommend using wire. I don't know the gauge on this, it's not very big. It doesn't really matter so long as it's not very thin. A pair of pliers to cut it. When it comes to felting needles, I'll mostly be using just one at a time. This is a 40 gauge. You can go larger or smaller. I may use this tool to speed up the process a little bit, but our mouse is really small so it may not be necessary. I won't be using a finger guard, but if you're new to felting, I would recommend it. An important thing you'll need is a surface to do your felting on. And this is a pillow specifically for felting. You can use a styrofoam block, a designated pillow, a table, whatever works for you. And you do want some sort of clear drying glue. I'm using Mod Podge because it works very well when it comes to wool felting. Now, on top of all of that, if you want to get a little more creative, I'll show you what I use to decorate the basket that he's sleeping in. When it comes to picking your mouse's nest, this can be quite versatile. For me, I have a mini basket filled with dried moss. And I use this Gorilla Glue for the moss, and I'll talk more about that later. I have these little birds, and I use this green wire to make vines, as you can see here. Some potpourri to decorate the nest, along with some feathers, and these little flowers which I found in the paper craft section of my craft store. All of this is completely optional. Yours doesn't have to be the same as mine, so search around your assorted craft bin for ideas, but I'll show you how I assembled mine. And with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to start off by showing you how to make the mouse, in case that's the part that you're most interested in. And making the mouse really isn't too difficult, it just takes some patience. To start with, you want to use your pliers to cut a piece of wire. I recommend cutting longer than you think. You can always trim it later. I'd say my wire is about 7 or 8 inches. Then, what you're going to do is take these two ends, line them up, and press them together. Then, taking a pair of pliers, I'm flattening that loop where the wire is folded. This end right here will be the tip of my tail because it's smooth. Don't want anyone getting poked. Now, holding this end in one hand, I'm going to use the pliers to start twisting these wires together. You don't have to worry about how it looks, you don't have to twist them tightly, you just want these two wire ends to be firmly joined. This will be the skeleton of our mouse, what we wrap our wool around. I'm going to come back up here and twist the other end as well. Once that's done, I'm grabbing my basket. I already laid my moss in, so I know the area that I'm working with here. I want the mouse's tail to curl up over its body. So I'm bending that end, then placing it, I'm bending the other end into a curve as well. This is the pose of my sleeping mouse. I'm going to shorten this end. I don't want that poking out. If you think you cut one end a little short, don't worry, we mainly just want to get the structure of our mouse built. Make sure to use the pliers to cinch the other end closed. I'm going to straighten out my wire for now because it'll be easier to wrap my wool that way. And I'm going to twist that wire a little bit more to make sure that the ends are firmly wrapped together. And I'm going to start by making the tail first. Take a long, somewhat thin strip of pink wool. You can do one of two things. You can wrap the pink wool around the wire and then glue at the end, which is what I'll be doing. Or you can put glue all down the length of this end and then wrap it. However, if you make a mistake, you will find it difficult to fix. So taking that pink wool, I'm going to start wrapping it about midway point of my wire. And I'm just going to slowly but firmly wrap that wool around that wire at an angle. And when I get to the end here, I'm going to dab some Mod Podge on that tip. Wipe the glue off. Then continue wrapping my wool. If you notice little gaps as you're wrapping, don't worry about it. You're going to wrap it back over again. Then coming to the end, I'm making sure that I cover that tip up. It can be a little bit tricky. And now I'm going to start going back towards my starting point. So I'm going to wrap the end of the tail again, but in reverse. This time, I'm actually going to take that pink wool and I'm going to pinch it against my wire and then just start twisting it. If you find this too difficult, you could just wrap the wool back around the wire to the beginning, but remember to do it at an angle. As you're wrapping, if you find your wool is a bit too loose, unravel it and try again. But remember, we will also be poking this wool down with our needle. Alright, setting it down, I'm going to start gently poking at that wool where I started. And I'm not pushing all the way through, I'm just very carefully taking little jabs at the wool to bind it. You'll inevitably hit the wire now and again, just be careful. And I'm stabbing the wool at a bit of an angle because it helps bind the fibers together. My wool is a little thicker here where I started, so I'm going to twist it some more. I'm going to take my glue and dab down the wool at this end too. If you do this, make sure to wait for the glue to dry before felting the tail more. I definitely made my tail longer than I intended, but that's fine. I'll be wrapping it over anyways. I'm also going to dab the tip of the tail with a little Mod Podge since it dries clear anyways. Once my glue is dry, I place my tail down on my pillow and I'm just going to start slowly jabbing that wool with my needle. Look for the spots where you notice that it's especially bulky and focus your attention on those areas. But you want to roll your tail and try to work on all sides pretty evenly. If you're hitting that wire, pull back your needle a little bit. As you can see, I'm working up along the wire all at the same angle to smooth it out. The base of my tail is going to be a bit larger than I intended, but that's okay. Remember to not push your needle all the way through, else you'll be poking fibers through to the other side and you'll have to fix those. So once I'm satisfied with my tail, I'm going to take a thick strip of my body color, find the spot I want my tail to start, and start wrapping that wool loosely around that area. And then, working at an angle again, start working my way up the wire. After a couple of wraps, I grab my needle and start stabbing that wool. And right now I'm not shaping my wool, I'm just binding it. Maybe get a slight form, but I'm not focused on the details right now. And don't worry if it seems small right now, we'll be adding more wool later. When felting, you work in layers. Once you've got the wool pretty well pinned, start wrapping again. When I get to the other end, wrap it around that point a few times and then work my way back. Take my needle and start binding that wool once more. Once that's done, wrap that area a couple more times and then start working my way back down. Okay, so I use my wool up and I'm going to take that needle and I'm going to start binding it all together. Now we're starting to get a bit of shape here. You want this section to be a fair bit larger than your head. But if it's not, that's okay. You just may need to add more or less wool to some sections. As you're stabbing, start thinking about your shape some more. And here you can see why we use that wire. I'm bending the head and body into a more curled position, so that when I'm stabbing my wool, I'm now working it into the semblance of the shape of my mouse. I'm still stabbing at an angle, as you can see, working especially on those bulky, uneven areas. Felting takes a lot of patience. You're effectively stabbing wool thousands of times in an attempt to turn it into something. It can be an intimidating art form, but also incredibly rewarding. Coming up here, I'm going to start forming the nose. That wool is very loose, as you can see. Again, Don't stab through to the other side if you can avoid it. You can fix it, but you're making more work for yourself. When stabbing the wool, you're always pushing your wool in the direction that you want to see a change. To give this head right here a little more curve towards the nose, I'm going to stab that wool downwards. Then work my way back up the head and along the body in rhythmic motions to work on getting a smooth curve. You can also use a larger tool to speed this process up, but with the mouse being so small, it's easy to lose the form that you're trying to obtain. And you can unbend or move the mouse body as you need to work on the wool. Coming down to the base of the tail, I'm stabbing that area a bit into shape and also binding the body to the tail a little bit. One side of my tail is looking a little bit iffy, but this will be the side of the tail that is curled up against the mouse, so it won't really be seen. Really focus on the head shape. Look up reference photos if need be. A thing to remember is that wool will compress as you work, and you'll be surprised at how much wool a small project like this requires. I started wrapping some more wool around my mouse to bulk them up. Be careful of how much you add. Do in thin pieces to start and then bind the wool to the body. And keep checking its placement in the nest. And I've broken one of my needles here because I hit that wire skeleton too hard. Be careful of that. I'm aiming right now to bind that new wool into place. And I'm actually going to cut it because I think it's just a little bit too much. Do not try pulling wool apart when working on a project. Just cut it. Because I want my mouse to curve into a ball, I'm really focusing on this area. And at this point, I'm really getting a sense of my mouse and where I need to snap the wool to get it into shape. You'll notice my head looks a little small. I'll be using more of the body color to secure the ears and limbs into place, so keep that in mind. And checking my mouse, I want to make sure he's going to fit into my basket. And I can take this chance to better bend him into shape. Alright, I'm going to continue felting. My mouse is almost done. You can see little strings of wool sticking up here and there. That's alright. One side of my mouse isn't going to be visible, so I'm not concerned about this part. I'm moving on to making the mouse's ears. I'm taking two very small bits of wool here, about the same size. Then taking one, I'm going to roll it into a ball between my fingers. This is the part that you really may want your finger guard for. I'm going to set it down, and I'm going to gently start stabbing it flat. After a few jabs, I don't even need to hold it in place anymore. This is why having a pillow is really helpful. It will stick to the pillow, so be careful not to push down too deep. I'm forming that ear into more of an oval with one side sort of straight. Start stabbing around the edges to make it more of a refined curve. Then flipping over, very gently stab the other side, just to tuck down those little fibers. This will be the back side of my ear. Taking my scissors, I'm going to carefully cut that ear into size and shape. And once I'm satisfied, take the second bit of wool and make a second ear. You can match the two ears up together and then cut them to the same size and shape. Now that that's done, taking one ear, I'm going to place on the back side of my mouse. Flip them over, and grabbing my needle, I'm going to gently start stabbing down on the edge of the ear and then down into the body. Not going too deeply. After doing that a few times, I'm going to take a little bit of my brown wool, gather it up, and place it over the edge of that ear and on the side of the head. And what I'm doing is I'm going to use this brown to bind my ear to my body. And I'm going to be methodical about this. using my needle to shift those strands around and not stabbing too deeply. But I do want to make sure that that new piece of wool is pretty flat. You want to make sure you're going through both the wool and the base of your ear. Once that is done, take my second ear, I'm going to flip my mouse and find its placement, and start stabbing the base of that ear down just like I did the first one. I did trim my ear down a little bit more before joining it to the body. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that brown color again and use it to bind the ear to the body. When doing these smaller details, you definitely want to use a single needle. And with the ears on, I can start forming the head better. When adding wool at this point, place it so it follows the curvature of your body. I'm only really focusing on this side. And you can see the mouse face really taking form now. A little wool can go a long way. With the ears done, I'm going to work on the paws. For this, I'm taking a long strand of pink wool, laying it down, I'm taking one end, and I'm going to start slowly rolling it up. And I'm going to roll it tightly, working at a bit of an angle back and forth, so that the bulk is evenly distributed to both sides and not just the middle. And about halfway, I'm going to start jabbing that wool, working into a cylindrical shape. I'm focusing on poking down the strands on the edges and curving the sides. Try to make both sides about the same thickness, but if you don't, not a big problem. I'm not making all 4 paws because 2 of them wouldn't even be visible in the basket anyways. And I always recommend cutting your yarn when you have excess. Remember, don't pull it, you can mess up your project. Now I'm just finishing working that pink into a cylinder, roll it as I shape it, and curve those ends. One side ended up being a bit bigger than the other, but that's okay, because mouse front paws are smaller. Honestly, you don't even have to add the paws if you don't want to. If you're placing them into a nest like I am, they're barely even visible. Continue working on your cylinder until you're satisfied. And when I'm done, I'm taking my scissors and cutting it so one side is a little bit longer than the other. Taking the shorter side, I'll place it where I want my front paw, and just start gently binding it to the body like I did the ears. But I'm not adding the extra wool yet. Then do the same with the back paw. I'll be adding brown wool to these spots as well. So grabbing a little bit of that body color, I'm going to roll it into a loose ball and lay it over a part of the foot and use it to form the hip and leg of my mouse. Try to keep it sort of circular, and then taking a little wool and adding it to that leg, it's going to give the mouse's body a little more definition. I'm going to do the same thing for the front paw. The front paws are smaller, so be careful about how much wool that you add here. Take some time to shape the arm and leg. And with more details added, keep working on your mouse and refining its shape some more. I'm going to add some wool to the stomach of my mouse to give it a bit more bulk and really bind those paws into place. I'm also just adding more wool to the overall body, laying it along the curvature of my mouse. I'm not working really fast here because I don't want to potentially lose the shape of my project. To make the nose, I'm just taking a tiny bit of pink wool and rolling it into a ball. Then placing it at the end of the face here, I'm just going to start gently poking it down. This can be a bit annoying because of how small our project is. But take your time. Make sure that it's firmly joined to the face. Now, for the eye, you want a very thin piece of black wool and twist one end tightly. You can wet it if that helps. Then cut one end so all the fibers are even. And then placing it where I want my eye to start, I'm pinning down one side and continuing to twist the other one. Once the black wool is twisted tightly, I'm going to pin down both ends, and I'm going to start gently stabbing that thin strip into place at a slight curve. This can take a little precision, so just be patient. Once I got the line to the length I want, take the scissors and cut this black wool. Come back with my needle and firmly bind it. Alright then, that's my mouse. I'm pretty happy with him. So now I'm going to gently start bending him back into shape and place him into my basket and adjust him if need be. Looks good to me. If this is the end of the tutorial for you, thank you for watching. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe so you can see more in the future. For everyone else, let's continue. Alright, I've assembled all my supplies for this. Time to put it together. To start with, I took this basket and I took this Gorilla Glue and I sprayed down my basket. I really recommend using a popsicle stick for this because this glue is really hard to wash off. Once you've got it placed, give it another spray and let it dry. You definitely want to spray this outside. And after you've sprayed it, move it from the spot that you sprayed it so that it doesn't stick to something. I would recommend doing all of this on a box or even something plastic so your project doesn't get glued to your surface. Alright, now that my basket is dried, it's time to decorate it. I ended up removing my bird off of this wire because it was falling off anyways. And I'm going to take the wire and I'm going to wrap it around one handle of my basket and then work it up around to the other side, tucking in those ends. I'm taking another one of those wires and just curving around the end of this basket. If you're adding vines to your basket like I am, you can do all kinds of things. You can add leaves, you can add grapes, flowers, have fun with it. Be mindful of where you place your decorations. Again, I'm thinking in layers. So I'm gluing down potpourri pieces first. And since it's hot glue, I'm making certain of my placement. And I'm continuing to add little pieces and then my feathers. When adding the feathers, I put the glue on the basket itself and then laid the feather down. Adding the mouse can be a bit tricky. Making sure of its placement, I'm lifting up one side and adding glue to the underneath. And then pressing on that spot, gently lift the other end and glue that part down as well. It's probably easier to squirt the glue on one side and lay your mouse down. If you end up like me where I have a spot the hot glue smeared, you can put a little decorative piece to cover that up. And then after all that, I glued my flowers on. And to top it off, I glued my bird onto the basket handle. Like I said, this can be a very versatile project and a simple felting tutorial because you really only have to focus on one side of your mouse, allowing some room for error. And there we go. There he is, all done. He came out pretty cute. I like how each comes out a little bit differently. And that's it. That's the video. This has been my first wool felting tutorial. If you enjoyed this video, then why don't you hit like and subscribe and stay tuned for future videos. And while you're at it, why don't you go and check out some of these other ones up here in the corner. You might find this one in particular very interesting. And with that being said, this has been McKnox. I'll see you soon.